Episode 236, The Chaos Garden Experiment. This is the Change Underground for the week ending 2nd of November 2020. Hi, I'm John Moore, your host. Decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. Over the past fortnight I've been preparing the fields for planting. I'm converting pastures to crops. I'm not inclined to spend my time growing lettuce and microgreens despite the obvious profit levels apparently available. I trace my way of doing things back to John Seymour and his complete book of self-sufficiency. He talks about growing grain crops and these sorts of things: barley, wheat, maize, peas and beans. To that end, I've set up a 5-year crop rotation with all of the above, leading to soil bursting with life, hopefully, for our garlic crop. In addition to Seymour, I was and still am influenced by Masanobu Fukuoka of the One Straw Revolution fame. There's links to Seymour and Fukuoka in the show notes. For me, the key takeaway from Fukuoka is the principle of planting before harvest. Clearly this is how seeds work, but in his case he meant planting the next crop before the last one was harvested. He did this for decades with rice as his summer grain, and barley, wheat, millet and so on as his winter crop. So no microgreens there. I'm not denigrating growers of microgreens, the practice just does not appeal to me. Recently, as longer term listeners will attest, I've been diving down the regenerative pathway. The key points I've taken from this methodology so far are: 1. Keep the soil covered. 2. Living plants are better than mulch, but mulch will do until things start growing. 3. Diversity above ground leads to synergies underground between bacteria, fungi and a variety of roots. So to that end I mowed the area to be planted with maize, in this case sweet corn and a variety called Golden Bantam. It produces, not surprisingly, golden kernels. 2 or more, about 6 or 7 inches or 15 to 17 centimetres per plant. They're excellently flavoured, early cropping. Plants usually to 1.5 metres, which is about, I suppose, 5 foot in the old money. And they're ready in 73 to 80 days. Now, the mowing of the area for the corn was achieved with a sickle bar mower. That's 2 sets of triangular teeth that oscillate back and forth parallel to the ground. This brings down the growth without shredding it the way a rotary mower does. It does take longer to decompose, so it protects the soil for longer, smothering any regrowth, or most regrowth anyway. The plan then was to no-till plant directly into this, and allow the golden bantams to rise from the mulch. A bit more on this variety. It is shorter than the traditional sweet corn on purpose, because we live in the roaring 40s, now 41 degrees south in fact, and when the wind blows, it blows hard, coming all the way from Africa with nothing in between. A smaller variety should be less prone to lodging with the wind, but hey, who's to know? And equally, as it is a short season variety, 11 to 12 weeks, it should be okay if we get an early frost, which is not unheard of in these parts. And so we should have the crop off before that happens. And we should in fact have a month up our sleeves for the whole thing to go to full maturity so that we can save seed. And possibly even start selling seed if we've got some to spare. Now the problem with the more slowly decomposing longer mulch is the extra length of the mulch clogged the planter. So I swept the mulch into a couple of windrows, leaving alleys for the corn. Adapt, improvise, overcome, as they say in the classics. But what to do with this collected organic matter? It could have been swept back over the planted seeds, maybe even should have. But I looked at it and thought there had to be something else I could do with it. A week earlier, having sorted through my seed for the season, I realised I had a reasonably large supply of half-used, never used, and meant to be planted one-day seeds. A quick rundown by vegetable type rather than each cultivar, as there's more than, it goes from 1 to sort of 7 or 8 cultivars for each vegetable. Will give you an idea of this resource. So I have amaranth, Cape gooseberry, cucumber, zucchini, thyme, peas, beans, squash, watermelon, tomatoes, broccoli, lettuce, snow peas, radish, pumpkin, basil and sunflower seeds, which I've now opened up and put them all in the one bucket. And it's quite an impressive mix. Now this seemed to be a useful collection for trying out the chaos gardens we discussed back in episodes 217 and 218. And of course this is supported by the writings of Dr. Christine Jones on the power of photosynthesis, or light farming I think she refers to it as. But where to plant these exactly I hadn't settled in my mind. I'm sure you can see where this is headed. So the windrows, of which there are two, are about 50 metres long and about a metre wide, or 55 yards by 1 in the old money. We are, however, entering a dry spell here in the northwest of Tasmania. There's not a drop of rain forecast for the next 10 days. Now I understand this is nothing remarkable in most climates, but it's odd here, particularly before the height of summer. So I'm holding off planting this cornucopia of seed until I can set up a watering system for the windrows, or we receive the forecast rain in about 10 days. There's a feeling that we're heading into a prolonged dry spell in my bones, as the forecast rainfall for October arrived, but at much lower levels than predicted. It could be that I just tend towards being pessimistic when it comes to rainfall, but it feels safer to work on the minimum rather than assuming the rain will always come. After all, when we lived in Ireland in 2018, they had their first drought since 1975. So maybe it's me. Hope not, smiley face. So what am I expecting from these two windrows of annuals? A massive habitat for beneficial predatory insects, for a start. Possible better choice for the parrots than the corn, because the corn will attract the parrots, but if the sunflower seeds are up higher, the parrots don't like to be crested, so they're more likely to go for the sunflower than the corn. I also expect to see a soil teeming with life as the different root communities hit different parts of the soil profile and allow interactions of bacteria and fungi. I also expect quite a body of organic matter to be slashed down in autumn for a fava bean cover crop to grow in. Mostly though, I'm looking forward to see what seeds germinate, which outcompetes its neighbours, and do some species make a late season comeback as the early achievers go to seed and drop out of the photosynthesis race. Equally, as the corn strips are about 4 metres wide, will proximity to this riotous growth have a positive or negative effect across those 4 metres? So many questions, and I'm sure if I just sit, watch and listen, more will come to me. I'm not sure if I'll make these alleys permanent or even semi-permanent thing, but I might. There appears to be some advantage, especially for the fungal portion of the soil microbiota, in a permanent structure. Well, as permanent as anything can be in this ever-evolving little blue rock we call our home planet. I mentioned the garlic earlier, and a quick update on the wonder substance, in inverted commas, made from worm castings that I've been applying to the garlic patch. Left a few beds untouched as a control and sprayed the others as directed for the last 4 months. At this stage, I can't see any statistically significant differences between the control and the test groups, but equally I haven't lifted any of the garlic bulbs either. They're not due to come out until late December, early January in this part of the world. The proof may be in the size and or flavour of the harvested garlic. I can say though that I'm somewhat surprised at the lack of obvious differences at this stage. And with that, let's always remember to underpin our work with the catchphrase, decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. Thank you all for listening, and I'll be back next week.